Hi, I'm Chrane. We just wrapped up a lot of story playthroughs here on the beta, and before the beta ends, I want to take this chance to just talk a bit about my experience with all the 5 classes we've played now. And I got almost all of them to 20. I think the Sorcerer is the only one that hasn't gone to 20, but honestly, Sorcerer is so strong, it's very good early game, and you don't need my recommendation to play it. You already know it's good if you've been to any of the forums or subreddits or anything. You know it's broken. You don't need me to get the full experience for you to know that. So, what are my thoughts on the Barbarian? Either do a lot of damage and die to someone breathing on you, or you do no damage and you don't die. Which is not optimal, because one of those, where you stay alive, means that the fight is going on for forever. Meanwhile, the sorcerer or the necromancer goes in there and just like smacks the boss on the face and then move on before you're even a fifth of the way through. So that's not that great. The damage overall in the Barbarian is very underwhelming. But I hear that melee gets really good when you unlock the Paragon boards and get to do later game dungeons at level 50 and stuff like that from people who played the closed beta like a few months ago, which was focused on endgame. Apparently the Barbarian and the Druid and stuff like that were really strong late game. But just based on what we have here, like up to level 25, the Barbarian feels underwhelming. So it's not a great leveling experience early on, which is a shame. I did try a few different builds. I went, let's see. I did do Frenzy, but before that I did Lunging Strike, I think, for a gap closer. Because you, like, zip-zoop, like, follow people whenever you strike. But then decided to go Frenzy instead, using Dual Wield as my basic attack, because it's a familiar feeling if you played Barbarian before in different games. Then what I decided to do later on was go like a bleed build with Rend, which was fairly satisfying against big packs of enemies out in the wild, but it's not great against bosses because a lot of them just are straight up immune to the bleed and stuff like that. So it doesn't really feel like you're doing much against bosses, like especially not the world boss. Against the world boss, I felt like everything I was seeing was just immune every time I was hitting him. Which, you know, is not that great a feeling to have when you're trying your darndest to fight and actually contribute to the group, but every piece of damage you're supposed to do is hit with an immune pop-up. So that's not a great feeling. Also, I'm 1 point away from getting to try the ultimates, so I haven't actually seen them in action or felt how they affect gameplay. I am very curious to see what the Ancients just look like in general, because it is the 3 barbarians you fight as statues at the end of Diablo 2, right? Korlik, Talik, and Madoc. It is the same 3 barbarians, and you could summon them in Diablo 3 as well, and they did look similar to their Diablo 3 style, not style, but the way their designs from Diablo 2, when you did summon them in Diablo 3. So I'm curious what they look like in this, if they're using like unique just designs, or if they are wearing actual gear in this game, because if they're if they're wearing gear from this game, that means you have a good like clean base to go off of if you want to make an armor set that looks like those barbarians, which could be a fun thing. So I'm probably gonna do this later today and just get my characters to level 22 and just unlock this ability so I can see what they look like. I'll probably post a picture to my Twitter or whatever, or to some other video I do later on, just so we can have a clear picture of them and what they look like, because I personally am very curious about it, but so far I have not seen them. Iron Maelstrom, and Wrath of the Berserker. I don't know if Wrath of the Berserker changes your appearance in this like it does in Diablo 3. I've not heard anything about it. So I do not know personally about that. Something very interesting about the Barbarian that is entirely unique to the character based, like the character compared to other classes, is how the arsenal works. I just got reminded of that while looking at this icon right here. The Barbarian has this real interesting thing where he has 4 weapon slots, right? So you have 1 weapon slot for two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed slashing, one-handed slashing, or bludgeoning, based on what you want to equip here in your dual wield slots. I think you can do bludgeoning one-handed weapons as well, like maces and stuff. I don't think you're tied to slashing weapons in dual wield. It's just I happen to have 2 slashing weapons on me right now and no bludgeoning weapons in my chest, so we'll never know. You'll find out later, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm fairly certain you can use bludgeoning weapons in the dual wield slots. What I like about this is that it makes a lot of thematic sense for the Barbarian. Because if you're doing a leap, right, and you're going to slam the ground, it's probably not going to be very effective to do with a sword unless you're using the Berserk Dragon Slayer sword right up here, right? Because that's like more than 2 meters long. It's just a slab of iron. So if you're using that, might be effective. But if you're using a normal two-handed sword or a spear, you're probably not going to cause much damage by just jumping and slapping the ground with the blade. But if you jump and smack the ground with like a huge mace or a hammer, it makes more sense in a fantasy world for that to cause like an actual impact on the ground itself. So I like the fact that they swap between the different weapon styles depending on what ability you're using. Frenzy, for example, my basic attack, which is based all around hitting fast. It's, as you can see at the bottom here, arsenal selection, dual wield. Of course, it's using your dual wield. You're not going to be quickly hitting someone using a spear in that way, right? It's not the most effective thing in the world. Well, I guess a spear could be easier using like a poking technique than trying to smack someone with a two-handed hammer really quickly. That doesn't make much sense. So I like the fact that the arsenal thing picks out for specific things, like this is what happens. But if you go for like something like rend, I can pick down here at the bottom. Right? Why is it not letting me pick? Is it because I can scroll? Why can I not scroll? That is strange. Can I change it here? Okay, yeah, I can change it here. If I go into my my actually learned skills, I should. Yeah, now I can change it down here. If I. Oh, okay. So if I have this window open, if I have the skill tree open, or all the skills available to me open, I get this thing down here at the bottom, which is like cycle weapon. So I can go between, on rend, I can go between my dual wield stuff or my slicing weapon. Or auto select and let the game pick the most fitting one for me. So at that point, you basically are changing how the skill interacts based on the type of weapon you're using when you're hitting them. Which is, I think, a really cool, unique system to the Barbarian. And I'm really glad they put this in here, because I would not have thought about this, like to put this in a video game over at all. And I'm really impressed that they put this in here. I'm glad it works as well as it does. Like on Whirlwind, you can pick between almost all your weapons, I think. Because all you're doing is spinning in a circle, right? With your weapon reached out at maximum length. And if you want to do that using your dual wield weapons, that's fine. If you want to do it using your slashing two-hander, that's fine. If you want to use the hammer and do that, that's fine too. And I like that interaction with your gear to the skill tree. I think it's a very interesting choice, and one I'm really happy they made. And I hope it actually, like, has cool endgame interactions when you start getting uniques and stuff like that. So I'm actually really looking forward to what that looks like at endgame. Because just as a concept, I think it's pretty damn good. Anything else? We've talked about how large characters are on the screen in general, which is not necessarily a problem for me tied to the Barbarian. It's just a problem for me in general with the game. But the Barbarian is a big dude. He fits as a big dude, though. It's a Barbarian. He should be huge. I just wish we could zoom out a bit, you know? Zoom out a bit. So he doesn't take up so much real estate on my screen. I like the general just design of the Barbarian aesthetically, just the way he looks. I think he's cool. Don't really have much of an issue with him, like the way they chose to design this character. I like the variety of gear, even though Barbarian is usually like fairly straightforward. You have a few dirty little shoulder pads, you have some fur, some straps across the chest. But in general, I just like the aesthetic they've got going. Like, this is probably the most unique piece of gear he has. And I actually really think it works. This gear, if I've understood the devs correctly, like this gear, for example, is probably only going to drop in the region where this gear specifically comes from. I think we're just seeing more gear in general in the beta, just to give us more of a taste of what the gear in the actual game looks like. Because they have talked about how items from specific regions will reflect the region you're in. So this gear, I mean, it's called Sandworn, so I'm assuming it's going to be dropping in Kyrgyzstan, which is where Chaldeum is located, if I'm not completely mistaken. I don't know if Luke Ghislaine from Diablo 2, the Act 2 desert town, is located in Kyrgyzstan, but I'm fairly certain that Chaldeum is located there. If it's not the Dry Steppes, is it? Hold on. Am I confusing Kyrgyzstan with Dry Steppes? This is gonna be bad. Hold on. Diablo world map. I don't wanna get this wrong. That would be embarrassing. Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, you have Kurost down here, which is like the jungle in Act 3 in Diablo 2. And then around here, which is like the lower Dry Steppes. So it should be around here then, in Kyrgyzstan, where you have Chaldeum. Probably that looks like a town to me. So that's probably going to be Chaldeum, which is the desert town in Act 2 in Diablo 3. So I think that's going to play a huge part in this story. So I would assume that this armor piece comes from this area, and we're just seeing it drop earlier in the game because they want to show off all the cool stuff that's going to be dropping later on. Because, as you can see, I have quite a lot of all helmets right here. Because it's not just filled to the edge here and then automatically refills with stuff, because this very specifically stops here, while this one stops here. So I think this is like the full list of gear we're going to be seeing at launch, maybe. But I think they're dropping more right now just to give us a taste. And the taste of the Barbarian gear we've gotten, I've enjoyed. I think it all works. I think it looks cool. I also like how one legendary helmet that might not look great has another legendary helmet that can drop that builds on it and looks way better. I enjoy that as well. It's a clever use of an asset you have and just building upon it, so it's very cool. I'm in general happy with the Barbarian, even though he feels kind of weak. I have faith that he will feel better in late game. And as the first class I experienced, he gave me quite a challenge with bosses and stuff like that, which I actually appreciated. When I played the Barbarian and that was my first experience, I actually enjoyed the fact that the game was challenging. I didn't know that the Barbarian was weak. I just thought the game was a bit harder, which was kind of nice. So I'm not really mad at it. And as people have said, like, it's going to scale better late game, so I'm excited to see how that looks. Overall, I'm happy with the Barbarian, even though he's weak. And I'm really looking forward to see how he performs in the actual release. Overall, satisfied.